Good afternoon, and welcome to our presentation on ConocoPhillips' journey to data modernization with Snowflake. My name is Paloma Urbano, and I led the project that enabled the solution.
Hi, my name is Anand Malgi. I'm an platform architect, led the implementation of Snowflake platform at ConocoPhillips.
Okay, so this is the agenda that we have for the presentation. We'll start talking about the journey, why, and how we implemented it. We'll then move into the value that our business is already getting out of the solution. Anand is going to talk a lot about the technical details, and we'll wrap it up with some reflections, learning, and what's next for us. Before we start, let me tell you a little bit about ConocoPhillips. Our mission is to extract oil and gas to power civilization. We are committed to innovation, to technology, and to be responsible producers today, and as well as we go through the energy transition. We are headquartered in Houston. We have about 12,000 employees and 14 business units. This is a map of our global presence. So let's talk about the data modernization journey. We started this project in mid-2022, and the goal was to move from on-prem enterprise data warehouse into a cloud environment. We wanted to be a solution that it was transformational, which for us meant not just a lift and shift, but actually to rationalize all of our data objects, our workflows, and our applications. As well, we wanted to establish new standards. We started with a position where we had a very successful enterprise data warehouse with thousands of users in our company. So we look back at what we had learned from our previous implementation, and what we wanted is a modern solution that was scalable and sustainable. And what that meant for us was a domain-centric data model, which Anand is going to talk about the technical details of how that was implemented. We wanted to have very practical architectural data standards. We wanted a security model that was flexible, so we could be SOX compliance in some area, but not in the whole enterprise environment. And we wanted to have a strong governance going forward. So the graph that you can see is a very high level of our implementation. We have more than 160 data sources getting into one enterprise data warehouse that is implemented in a Snowflake. We hold in there our business data, supply chain, finance, HR, or operations, and all petrotechnical data, or wells, or production, or facilities, as well as our commercial data and data that we use for competitive market intelligence. As I mentioned, we have one Snowflake environment for the whole company, and we rationalize from thousands of reports and applications into about 300 applications that we're leveraging to be a standard for the company. This is our journey of the project. We have 6 major releases, and at the end, we have the Teradata decommission readiness. We started with a small release, which was for our business unit in Canada, and we follow up with the largest release, which was the release 1C, which involved a lot of our business units and functions. And then we had other releases for Asia Pacific, Norway, and finally was the US. We created more than 30,000 data objects. All of our business units and functions, they've been part of the project. We created 2,700 test scripts because we automated a lot of the testing, and we consolidated from 22 warehouses into 6. But most important, we rationalized about 65% of the data objects that we have, as well as the report and the dashboard. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of like the perspective of the breadth and the depth of this project. This is the process that we followed for every release. We started with an assessment, and we decided what was going to be kept, what was going to be rationalized, and what was going to be re-architected and deleted. After we have that scope, it was approved by a governance board. And after that, we started with the development. We have 3 rounds of testing, 2 system integration testing and 1 user acceptance testing. And after that, we got into the preparation for the release. We did the cutover, we have the release, and after the release, we have 3 months of what we call hypercare that ensure the stability as well as the quality of the product. And after hypercare, we transitioned to the operations team. And we repeated this for every release. As you can imagine, sometimes we have parallel releases because otherwise we couldn't make up the timeline that it was committed for the project. We partnered with a technology company. Our company did not have the resources to enable this solution. And we needed to learn how to work with this technology company. From ConocoPhillips, the project was, we had like about 120 people participating in the project. And at the peak of the project, our technology company, they had 25 development pods, which was about 300 developers working the different releases. So it was a lot of effort managing all the scope and the delivery of all these products. As I mentioned, we created 2.7 automated testing scripts. We automated 2 areas. Every single value that was coming out of SAP S4 for our financials and all the values that we had in SAP, we ensured that it was tested as they were landing into Snowflake. We really needed to have that accuracy. And the second part that where we used automated testing was when we did a lift and shift of all the ECC historical data from Teradata into Snowflake. So projects are fun. The development is always a lot of fun because we're building. But I want to highlight 2 areas that they're not as fun, but they were critical for this project. The first one is the transition from hypercare into the operations team. We deliberately decided the project was going to run outside the operations team because the pace of a project is so different than the ongoing operation. But we needed to ensure a very seamless transition from the project side into the operations. So we transitioned all the guidelines, all the governance, and ensured that the receiving team was ready for getting the releases as we continue working on the project. The second important phase that it was very critical for us was the actual decommission of the old system. We don't do that very often in our company, so we're not really good at that. After we closed out all the project, we did a one-time lift and shift, as I mentioned, of the historical data. And the automated testing helped us with the sign-off by the business that this data was correct in Snowflake. And Anand is going to talk about a little bit of how do we architected that data in the new Snowflake environment. But that was very important because we have thousands of employees working in the old system that they needed to be ready to take on the new system. So a lot of communications, training, and ensuring that they can move into the new environment. So let's talk about the business value. As I mentioned, this project was designed to be transformational from the beginning. And with that, what I mean is we had new workflows being implemented in a new ERP environment. And we wanted to make sure those workflows, they also came into the Snowflake area. The feedback from the business already has been extremely positive. First of all, there was no business discontinuity as we were doing the project. We implemented all the workflows that the business had in the previous environment in the new system, but then we added a few more. So just to give a few examples, our capital projects team, they now have a global view of all the data. Our finance organization, they have data that they do for planning, for forecasting, and for actuals. They didn't have that before, so they're very excited, and they can summarize that data at different granular or more summarized level. Our supply chain has new modules, like the transportation module management system, and our operations team, they have all the management of change and the permit of work data in one environment. This was really breaking down the silos of our organization. And was very interesting is as the different groups that were starting to add data into the Snowflake environment and the product owners start seeing they wanted the data from the other groups make available and usable to them. So in addition to the value to the business, something that we're very excited is about the new technology. And the business is as well. Starting with the Snowflake performance, we had multiple instances of our previous enterprise data warehouse because performance was not there. Now we had one environment that is accessible from Asia Pacific, from Alaska, from Norway, from all the locations. And performance is even better than what we had previously. The second is what they've been talking in the conference about simplicity. Our business loves Snowflake. They find it super user-friendly, so they're not afraid into just getting into Snowflake and looking at the data. So this is reducing the number of reports and come and pull me this data. What is happening here? They just go directly into Snowflake and pull some of that information. The data quality has improved tremendously. We are labeling every data set with the business product owner as well as the IT steward. So there is a lot of more clarity on who owns that data, and if you have questions, who do you approach? And lastly is the data sharing. As you can imagine, we partner with a lot of companies, so we don't have to bring their data into our environment anymore. We just go and grab it for them, as well as the quality of the data has improved. Lower 48 is one of our largest business unit, and for them, what it was critical was the data can be trusted now. They used tremendously the previous enterprise data warehouse, but there was a lot of data duplication, data deprecation, so they did a lot of cleanup, and now they have a lot of governance to maintain that data quality. So for them it was the data now, I could trust it. The second key thing for them is they do a lot of asset acquisition. So we are acquired from other business different assets, or we have acquired other companies, and now Snowflake is accelerating bringing that data in. But in addition, they're very excited about the new functionality that is coming for them. Things like the reserves calculation, optimizing some of the rig allocation that they do, some of the forecasting, the cost of the operations, and things like that. As you can imagine, the finance team is another group that is very excited about the new solution. They actually took the opportunity to create consolidated financial reporting as part of this effort. So they have a global set of reports that they feed all the data from Snowflake, and that they globally can see all they can do all their financial reporting. I mentioned about the granularity of their data. And what is most important for them is that SOX environment. They didn't have that before, and now they have a SOX environment, but it's only for the areas that require. So we don't have to be running additional SOX-compliant audits that's very costly for us. They are super excited about the new capabilities. Now that they have all this data, how can I get more out of forecasting, prediction, doing more analytics, managing by exception? So this is an area where I'm sure we're going to grow a lot in the analytical technology going forward. So with that, I hand over to Anand.
Thank you, Paloma. So now I will take some time. I think I've divided this technical overview, and there's a lot more information that we have been, last 2.5 years we have deployed the project, but I'll not be able to cover everything, but we have picked three topics mainly: the platform architecture, and how we migrated the data from Teradata into Snowflake, and third one is the security and the performance. So the three areas I'll be covering in this talk. But if you have any other questions, please stop by after the presentation. We'll be able to answer any questions. So let's look at the solution architecture and how the main thing was integrated environment. That was one of the pillar that when we started the project, said we need to make sure that data is not sitting everywhere. That was the main problem we tried to solve, as well as make sure that we have one single source of truth for people to be able to analyze the data. So in that goal, what we have done is one of the biggest decisions that we made in the beginning of the project. It took some time to get everybody understand how the cloud works, how to set up the database in the cloud, and also understand having a single environment that can support the multiple like dev, test, production environments within a single account. That was a little harder to explain the security team, disaster recovery team, understand, hey, what happened, this goes down, what happened, how to manage the change between the environments. They were all trying to match with the on-prem environment. We have different physical environments available. Now how we manage with single account with multiple environments residing in the same, operating in the same place. But with the thanks for the Snowflake guidance and the best practices, when we explained our use case, they said definitely yes, we can meet that challenge. So using a single account, and we have done that. As you can see, we have a single account and we use a private link to connect. That's how we connect all our data. And also we have enabled a global storage integration, a way of how to connect all. Instead of multiple places connecting to Snowflake, we have created a global storage area where people can put the data, and that is sourced through Snowflake to be able to see it. Next one is I'm going to cover on the data. This is what earlier Paloma mentioned about the domain-centric data, how we set up the domain-centric databases, right? So we have a centralized platform with dev, test, production environments, which enables controlled and auditable deployment that we can deploy from the dev to the test to production, as well as it meets our SOX requirements. And so with these three different logical separations, each one of these, if I go point each one, we have the domains. Then we also have the BUs here, like BU1, like Lower 48, Alaska or Norway, some of those BUs are defined. So we just have a prefixes in the naming convention saying which BU data that we are storing. Along with that, we also have a prefix for the domain-centric data. So we have set up that three different environments. But you also see a last one, we are calling that as a leverage. The goal of this is we have static data and admin and FinOps and the data governance and the data sharing area. So these are the common databases that we're leveraging across the environment. Example, if there is any data, the historical data that Paloma was talking about, when we migrated one time, if the data required for reporting, instead of storing in dev test production, we have put the data in the static data database. That way it is stored once, but it's shared across the environments. We don't have to just use the RBAC solution to be able to share the data across in dev test production environments. We also have an environment for the administration team to be able to manage the whole platform. The important piece is the FinOps is another one where we started tagging all the databases, schemas and objects, so that we can have a governance for the financial operations. How can we make sure that we want to leverage Snowflake platform, at the same time our goal is to reduce the cost. Whatever we're spending on-prem, we need to make sure to reduce the cost. So the FinOps is a very important piece of all our architecture. Whenever we thought of doing, make sure that we have FinOps enabled, we have tracking enabled, we have monitoring set up, we have tagging done for all of the data objects. Then the other portion is data governance and the data share. So data governance is to make sure who is the data, who has the data ownership, who is the custodian. All of those information are stored in the data governance. The last one is data sharing. I think this was the big surprise for us. When we started the project, we did not think data sharing will be that much important for the project. But as we get along the project, when we realized that so many vendors, ConocoPhillips deals with so many operators and vendors, they also use Snowflake. When we started the project, when we are reviewing the Snowflake team, we had a Snowflake RSA working with us. When we looked at this feature, always we question, okay, if there is one of our partner has the Snowflake, why are we trying to integrate the data? Let's get rid of the data integration portion. Let's just go with the data sharing. That's how we were able to reduce the amount of integrations and reduce the operational cost, also maintaining all of those integrations, right? So that was a big surprise when we started. We did not think, we were thinking we still have to build those integrations, but it was a good surprise for us to start using those features. So this is definitely a learning curve, because the current database that was on-prem, that didn't have a traditional DevOps process, administrators, teams will be the one that requesting all the changes. They are the one that's going to execute the change in the production. But we had to do a mindset where, okay, instead of administrators, we need to give self-service for the developers, because we're creating this a beautiful platform where they should have control over that, what objects they are deploying, how they're deploying, when they're deploying. We should not control by the admin team, because that was a big challenge. We had to have outages and we had to schedule all the changes. Instead, we are giving control to that each capability of the business units. So we developed a DevOps architecture with the help of Snowflake's guidance. So we are using Azure DevOps. We had a presentation last year in detail about this, but I'm not going to go through very detailed. Basically, we are using Azure DevOps and schema change. And this year, Snowflake has been releasing new features in DevOps. So we are going to enhance this architecture what we have today. So in the next year, hopefully by next summit, we'll have a different Snowflake, DevOps architecture based on new features that Snowflake has been giving us. So the dual development is this, as Paloma mentioned, that we have released various releases that we went through. So how do we support various releases at the same time? We are not impacting the production support, as well as we are not impacting the project line. We are not stepping in each other's toes, right? So that was one of the goal is, that's when we started something called project path and the production path. So the project path is where we are going to set up the new project. Example, release 1 is done. It will be in the project path, and it will be in the production path. Then we go to the next release. At that time, we'll start developing things in the project path. Once the project is ready for the release, that's when we take all the changes back from the project path, back into the development, use our regular production path to deploy the changes. That is part of our cutover activity. So we have tested thoroughly, but during the project development, if somebody needs access to the data that's already in production, we have enabled the cross DB access using RBAC security, and anything that we needed in the UAT or in the SIT environment, we were able to just enable the cross DB, able to do some testing, make sure that all the changes that are required for this new release is accommodated. Then once release is ready, we were able to deploy them to the production path. This helped us, the production support, because once we do the each release, we give that each release to the hypercare. And once hypercare is done, that's operationalized. There is a separate operations team that has no I would say they have visibility, but still they are not responsible what we are doing in the project side. So we want to keep it separate, and this architecture helped us a lot not to step on each other's toes and when we're deploying things. So here are the 4 I think main areas that we considered. The database design, like as we mentioned, we have reduced the duplication. That way we don't want to store because using a single account also helps us. When we clone the data from production to the dev or production to the test, we are not actually physically cloning the data. The same copy is maintained there. That's helped us. And also the domain-centric one, it reduced the data duplication. So each BU will not have their copy of, if there is any data that is shared across enterprise, it went into enterprise domain. That way, the data will not be copied for each BU. Because there is no reason to copy the data. Earlier, they used to have their own local databases. They want to copy the enterprise data to their local. That way, they can get the performance. We were able to prove the performance. Say, you don't have to worry. All the data will be in one particular database. We will just give you access through the BI layer, and you can get access to the data what you need without any performance degradation. And the data integration. So we have done a lot of proof of concepts for data integration. That's again to do the cost control, how we do the extraction, transformation, and loading, which tool needs to be done, or where we need to perform these actions. So we have done the POCs before we implemented the architecture. Security and compliance, that's another one. So make sure every new data that is flowing into Snowflake, either internally or externally, we want to make sure that we meet our IT controls and IT security controls, and that meets the SOX controls standards. The last one is about the object management. As I said, this is something new that we introduced. So we had to make sure the development teams are aware of how they can manage their own schemas, their own objects without worrying about. So we had to help them understand, and we conducted several office hours. We conducted the training sessions for the development teams to be able to do this. So once we have the platform set up now, I'm going to go over on the Teradata Snowflake path. So in this one, as Paloma mentioned earlier, we are trying to archive the data one time, but doesn't mean that we are taking all of the Teradata data and putting it to Snowflake. We are not reducing anything. So what we have decided is what data is actually required to be joined with the historical data that is required to do the business reports. Only that data will be put into the Snowflake. Anything else that required for auditing purposes, that required for for our data archival purposes, the data is still migrated from Teradata, but it was left over in the ADLS or in the blob store layer itself. But it's still available in case somebody wants the data, they'll be able to access it. When needed, we'll be able to create an external table in Snowflake and give them that access, but we have not moved all the data within the Snowflake. Then we also mentioned like having the automated migration is important. That way we don't spend time in moving exporting each file individually and validating. So we have set up a migration workflow that can move the data from Teradata into Snowflake or into the blob store. The last one is, which is important, without the business sign-off, we cannot close the project. We cannot tell them they need to go and sign off that they can see the data, what they are seeing today versus what they'll be seeing going forward. That is, 3 things that were objectives of this migration. So here are the very high-level architecture. We have used the Teradata TPT export and put the data into Unix system. Then we use the Snowflake copy command to directly load into the Snowflake. Anything that data needs to go into Snowflake, we use the Snowflake copy command. But anything that data needs to stay in the ADLS layer, we can lift it in the ADLS layer here. So here is where we loaded the data into that the historical data or the static data, the database that I was mentioning in the beginning. All of the historical data into one database rather than into 3 copies. There is no dev test production for historical data. It just stays only once. So here a couple of things. We had some, any migration will have some things, learnings we will not know when we start, selecting the tool, the platform. So we had an issue with one of the blob storage data that we have leveraged our traditional ETL tool to be able to move the data. And as I mentioned earlier, the static data, we have used it tremendously to put the data there to share across environments. I think currently Teradata was still running, helping with our current production requirements. So we have to understand, what is the limitation of the current capacity, because as long as we know what is our deadline to move the data, we were able to run some of these processes of exporting data in the off-peak hours of the current production system in Teradata. If you need to, do it more robustly, then you have to add more resources on Teradata, but we didn't do that. We were able to accommodate the existing Teradata platform and export the data in a fashion where we can migrate it. So the last section on this one is security and optimization. So let's look at the data security. And definitely, rollback design is one of the things that we spent more time in the beginning. So when we started the security architecture, we wanted to make sure, set up a security that doesn't make us changing, going forward. We were thinking through the future use cases, how to make it very simpler. So we have done the RBAC as a persona-based RBAC, basically. So as you can see, we have an analyst here. Then we have the data engineers, and firefighter, and DevOps. So we have created various personas, and we have simplified. Every database will have a standard number of roles. Only exception is something is not fitting in this template, then we create an additional role that is required, else each database comes with the standard roles. And that way, everybody knows what each role is used for. Everybody knows how it is being segregated, what access of data they get. So they were able to get the access through using, in this case, we have used some automated self-service of access also in Snowflake using SailPoint. So we have designed all of these roles in the SailPoint. The developers can just go there to the SailPoint, request access, whatever the role they need. Then there is an automated process that goes to the approver. Then once approves, then that SailPoint will grant access to the individual user. So there is no administration team involvement in granting access to the Snowflake. That is one of the IT security requirement. That way we have tracking and auditability of who is granting access to whom. All of those things were able to manage this. Then, as earlier in the morning they mentioned, MFA is required now going forward. So, but we have been following that all along. So we didn't wait for this decision from Snowflake. But still, we have some users that service accounts are there because those applications were at that time they were not supporting MFA. But now we are mandating those applications to either go with other options that were provided for MFA. So we are working through them, and we have very small percentage that we have to convert, but we are in the goal to reach that in another few weeks. Then the network policies, always whitelisting the IP addresses. There were some cases where we could not get that data access through private link. That was one of our, if there is any exception, then we use the network policies and IP addresses, restrictions to be able to accommodate those requirements also. So this the data governance is the one that, as I mentioned earlier, object tagging. We have implemented a comprehensive object tagging for each one of them. For all of the databases and schemas, we have done the tagging, object tagging. Then we have used the Snowflake features for the row access policy, in masking policies, anything like any financial data or personal data, PIA data. We were able to use the Snowflake features to meet the requirement from the financial teams. Then we have all set up the row access policy to restrict which users get what type of data. So we were able to use a lot of Snowflake features as part of the project, implement them as a standards. That we're going forward, if somebody requires, then we have got it covered there. Yeah, so this is another one that we talked about, like in partner collaboration. So the data sharing has become an important piece of our journey, and we have been leveraging. Now we are trying to kind of, as our governance rule is, if somebody wants data, send it to us. We ask them if they have a way to send the data through Snowflake data sharing. That's our first question. Some vendors, they never had Snowflake. Now they're setting up a Snowflake account for us and sharing the data. They said there's a faster way that's easier, and they can share the data, and we can share the data back to them. So that's our first question, is if somebody wants our data. We work with a lot of vendors. We are asking them, can we do that? It's cost effective, and also it is, they can see the data in near real time. Then we don't have to worry about somebody, sending the data. Somebody has to validate and operate and manage. So that is one of the new, practice that we are implemented. Then we also have some connectors. As I said, we have ServiceNow data. We use the Snowflake connector to use the ServiceNow data to bring into Snowflake. Earlier, we were using some other ETL tool to read the ServiceNow database and write the data into Teradata to look at ServiceNow data. But now we have leveraged the Snowflake ServiceNow connector. So when we are trying to use any automation that Snowflake is giving us, we are trying to take advantage of those. That way, we can reduce the amount of manual setup that we have to manage going forward. And we have, because of single account, we were able to use the cloning for any data refreshes. We don't have to worry about, so that is becoming very beneficial for us. Just we clone the data into other environments to be able to do it. So the last section is, this is important because everybody, Snowflake is definitely, you need to know how to allocate the resources. That way you use appropriate resources to perform your workloads. If you don't do it, there will be a lot of cost overruns. So in the beginning itself, Snowflake has provided the guidance, how to set up the warehouses and how to allocate the resource monitors, how to set up the controls them. So we were able to set up the dashboards. As part of the project, what we have done is we have also created a dashboard. So the developers in each project and release, they'll go look at the poor performing queries, what things need to be tuned. So they have that information instantaneously on a daily basis. We'll refresh that reports for them. That way they can take advantage of that information when they're deploying. Because if you deploy a wrong stored procedure or a query, then the cost will continue to be increased for that if you don't tune it before you're deploying. So we're trying to put some control before anything goes to the production. That has to be reviewed for the performance tuning also. That way it makes sense, and we can have the low cost for our workloads that we are deploying in the production environment. Then regarding the data ingestion performance, so we had some cases where the data was processing outside of Snowflake. That's costing us more. We did the push optimization where we bring that code into Snowflake and run those transformations within the Snowflake to reduce the cost. The last one is the FinOps optimization, which is, as I mentioned, our Snowflake account, as you can, as one of the highly tuned for the financial optimization. So we have cost performance measured all the time. So we are happy that when we implement new services, we always put those controls in place. That way we know how much we are using, how can we monitor those costs. There are few key metrics here. The query performance we have achieved over 35% improvement, and also we created, like using a simple QAS, we created additional warehouse computing. Example, just using QAS, we created additional 10% warehouse computing capability just by turning on some of the features. We didn't have to do much code changes by developer, but just by changing some of the parameters, we were able to gain that. And we deployed over, using DevOps, we have deployed more than 200K objects, using the DevOps mechanism. Then, as mentioned, it's important to make sure our platform is secure. So we are always looking for, room for improvement and make sure that all our users, are compliant in how they are using Snowflake, basically.
Okay, so one of the key things about the technology, we're excited about the new features that they were presented this morning, because as you can see, we had to implement some shortcuts or outside the Snowflake, so it's good to see Snowflake improving and changing. So as we reflect back on our project, I want to share with you some of the learnings. The first one is about being flexible. So we started this project, and it was going to be a 1-year project, and it turned into a 2.5 year because we were moving all of our ERP systems into new environments. And that drove, instead of a sprint, this became more like a marathon, so different pace, different resourcing. The second thing, this project was a time-driven project. We were given due release at this time, and we had to take some compromise. One is on the very practical architectural data standards and proven technology. We just couldn't test things that they were not technology, that it was not ready. To maintain the project velocity, we use all the agile methodologies, but what will work best for us is what we call the look back. We continuously look and improve the way we were running the project. We had teams running 24 hours. We have an onshore and offshore team, and that really helped us with that project velocity. As you can imagine, we started to work with the business, and very quickly, as we were being successful with the solution, they wanted more. So the scope creep was tremendous, and that's where we had a very good governance to say, no, we can do this, this cannot be done, it has to be done after the project. With regards to the resources, not everybody is cut out to do projects. It really requires a pace and collaboration that a lot of our people also didn't have. As I mentioned, we work with a technology company, and we needed to learn how to work with them and them how to work with us. And that took time. It took gaining their trust and establishing roles and responsibilities and expectations on both parties. I mentioned that we work with about 120 people from ConocoPhillips. My team was 5 people. So we had to influence, and we had to work with a lot of our business to ensure that they prioritized this project and they could give us the time and the resources that they were needed. Do you want to talk about the system thinking?
Yeah, definitely. System thinking is basically what we want to convey, that is, especially implementing Snowflake alone is different, but implementing Snowflake with various other ERP systems is very complex. Because if those ERP systems are still they're not productionized, and Snowflake is also not productionized, understanding how the implications are there, and each of those ERP systems could also be coming from different cloud platforms, things like that. So getting an understanding of overall big picture, how do we connect? Make sure first step is, talk to the security before you assume, yes, they will allow this. Assume they will allow this part of, they will whitelist this particular IP. I think going through that IT security reviews is very important for us, because we don't want to caught off guard. When we tested a particular architecture and that performed well, but IT security says, nope, you cannot do this because it has some gaps in the security, there is a compromise. We cannot compromise on security, so we cannot say we don't have anything override there, unless there is a mitigation that can provide them, yes, we can guarantee the security, right? So that was the system thinking wise. There are 2 or 3 things I can talk about, like, SaaS VI is one of the one that implemented only for a particular business unit, not for the whole company. Then we have to understand how that new platform integrates. Then SAP DI is something new we are using to replicate SAP data into Snowflake using DI, which is not done by many companies. And we have to understand what are the implications, how to do that, in a performant way. Then the other one is the Power BI is a good example where we did the benchmarking. So what we had to do is we had to take current reports and try to get those. Instead of getting the reports, we have leveraged the Snowflake's built-in data. They have 10 GB, 10 terabytes, 100 terabyte data sets are there. We have used those data sets, created the sample. They also have a well-designed sample queries are there, the TPCB data that we have taken. We have created a benchmark showing that, okay, this is the amount of data. If you run this way using Snowflake, this is what you expect to present, the performance. We have compared from each location. Hey, you run a query from Alaska, run query from Australia, run query from Norway, same queries. We have selected those various sizes, like 1 million result, 10 million result, 5 million result, 100,000 result. Show them, depending on how much data you are going to request, this is what the performance you expect. That way there is no surprises when we set up the platform, and that way they understand what is the expected results then when we give them that particular product to them. That is important. So that I would say do some of those benchmarkings, share with the business users early and often, that we get their alignment so that they understand what is how we are delivering. At the end of the day, we are serving everything for the business purpose. So if business is not aligned, whatever technology, beautiful thing you build, if they're not going to use it, it's kind of a waste of platform that we are going to set up.
Yeah, so with regards to the communication and the organizational change management, that was critical for us. So from the beginning, we identified all of our stakeholders, and we have regular communications with them very often. We also took the opportunity to educate our organization on the importance of data. So we created videos where our senior leaders, they were the ones telling us the importance of this project, why data was important for the future of the organization. And especially with the decommission, we started our change management project 6 months ahead of the decommissions, having everybody ready. We did training, office hours. We did testimonials from our leaders just to ensure that everybody was ready for that transition. So to summarize our presentation, we've talked about the journey, moving from Teradata to Snowflake, the value that the business is getting out of the project already, the technical details or learnings, and what is next for us is getting more value out of what we have built. We have an amazing foundation, but the business really want to get more insights, more analytics, more AI from this platform. So thank you.